Today in Total War Warhammer 3, we'll be ranking the Greenskin factions from worst to best. Coming in at number 6 is Wurzag the Great Green Prophet. His faction effects are he can construct Savage Orc recruitment buildings in any settlement, campaign movement range plus 10% for all armies, upkeep minus 15% for Savage Orc units, Winds of Magic power reserve capacity plus 15 for all armies, and his lord effects are a recruitment cost minus 50%, charge bonus plus 20, and a physical resistance of 15% for Savage Orc units, as well as Wurzag's Wa. And for your starting location, you start out about in the middle of the African continent. And for diplomacy, you are hated by literally everyone. Well, minus 2 Skaven clans, but they're not going to exist for very long. Ironbrow's Expedition, minus 100. Last Defenders, minus 40. Tlakua, who you start out at war with, minus 77. Zlatland, minus 40. The Dune Kingdoms, minus 20. Manfred, minus 40. And the Bowmen, minus 100. So yeah, you have enemies on all sides. And your cities are basically out in the open. One of the few advantages that you do get is that on turn 1 you'll be able to confederate with the Leafcutters tribe, giving you the Suntree Glades, as well as this city down here. And it is nice to be able to have this city down here, since otherwise you would have had to come all the way around to attack it, so it does save a little bit of time. But at the end of the day, you are surrounded by enemies, or potential enemies, or future enemies, and you will eventually be at war with Krokgar and Manfred, and it is because of the absolute sheer number of enemies that you have to face that Wurzag is getting last place on the list. Coming in at number 5 is Grimgor Ironhide. His faction effects are he unlocks hero recruitment of Black Orc Big Bosses for all provinces, and has a hero capacity of plus 2 for the Black Orc Big Boss. Income from post-battle loot is plus 30% for all armies, and upkeep minus 15% for Black Orcs and Big Gun units for all armies. For his lord effects, he replenishes 10% of campaign movement range after winning a battle, he gives the fear attribute to Black Orc units, and he gets the ability You're Next, as well as Grimgor's Wa. For your starting location, you start out in the mountains, underneath the Chaos Wastes, and similar to Wurzag, you have extremely dangerous enemies nearby in the form of the Chaos Dwarfs, and they do not like you. You have negative 100 relations, and the faction that you start out next to is Strength Rank 1. For comparison, you start out at Strength Rank 114. You are also at war with some ogres, but they're not going to be particularly difficult. However, somebody that could quickly become a problem is Kolak, since he is right above you, and then you have Tamarkon right above him. And one of these two Warriors of Chaos factions is going to win the war against each other. So whichever one wins, you're going to want to ally with, so that way they don't come down and take your territory. All while keeping an eye on the Chaos Dwarves, who on turn 1 got trade agreements with all 3 major Chaos Dwarf factions. And his trade agreements will quickly turn into defensive alliances. So in short, you're surrounded by Chaos Dwarfs, and Chaos Dwarf weapons versus Greenskins. That's not going to go well for the Greenskins. And in addition to this, Grimgor Ironhide is a very basic Greenskin faction, and doesn't feel overly unique to play. And so, for those reasons, he's getting the number 5 spot on the list. Coming in at number 4 is Skarsnik of the Crooked Moon. His faction effects are, he can only recruit Orc units after capturing Carrick 8 Peaks, character hero experience gain plus 100% for all heroes, hero action cost minus 50%, ambush success chance plus 15% for all armies, as well as an upkeep minus 20% for Goblin and Squig units. And for his lord effects, he enables a stalking stance, gives leadership plus 8 and melee defense plus 4 to Night Goblin units, and gets the ability Skarsnik's Wa. You start out in the mountains nearby to the Empire, and you are at war with the Bloody Spears. Until Carrick 8 Peaks is taken, you will be losing control in all provinces. And for diplomacy, you have some potential help, primarily in the form of Gorbad Ironclaw, the Red-Eye Greenskins, or at least until Carrick Kadrin wipes them out. And you could get an alliance with Tretch Craventail, although since he is Skaven, who knows if he'll keep it or not. And Thorgrim Grudgebearer isn't too far away. Upon taking the World's Edge Archway, you can focus on building up this settlement to tier 2, and then focusing on the Watchtowers, so that way you can stop any enemies that are going to try and launch an attack into your territory. And you can set up a similar defensive location over at Thorgrim Grudgebearer's capital. So now why is this faction number 3? If you're in a decent location, you can set up some defensible accessible spots. Sure, you have to take care of 8 peaks, but that's pretty easy, and you're not surrounded by extremely hostile enemies. Well, firstly, you do have Chaos Dwarfs who could potentially break through your defenses at the World's Edge Archway or just skip past them. And then the other issue is that Skarsnik just isn't as fun as he used to be. Used to, you could get an upkeep reduction of 40% for Goblin units, and then you could use a mixture of tech, as well as character attributes, and the blue tree inside of your skills to get about a negative 90% reduction on the majority of Goblin units, meaning that Skarsnik was a Goblin-tied faction. You would just send out armies of Goblins, one after the other, to attack any opponent, and it was an absolute ton of fun. But after the Greenskin rework, he's lost that fun factor that he used to have, and so for that reason, he's less fun, he's less powerful, and that is why he's getting the number 4 spot on the list. Coming at number 3 is Grom the Paunch. His faction effects are he has access to Grom's Cauldron, diplomatic relations minus 80 with High Elves, and an upkeep minus 20%, as well as charge bonus plus 15 for Chariot and Pump Wagon units. And his Lord effects are leadership plus 8 and a physical resistance of 10% for Goblin units, as well as Grom's Wa. For your starting location, you begin inside of Bretonnia, and you are at war with Aquitaine. All of the other Bretonians absolutely cannot stand you. The Dwarves can't stand you. The High Elves absolutely despise you. The Wood Elves can't stand you. And your only potential Greenskin ally is going to get wiped out by turn 2. All of the territory nearby you has an unpleasant climate, which will slow down your economy, or make things more expensive to build. However, if you look at your climates, the suitable climates involve temperate islands, which means that Ulthwine is actually a suitable climate. So what you have to do is you have to take Grom the Paunch, take Aquitaine, take Bordeleau, and then beeline right for Ulthwine. And in doing so, you're going to leave your territory wide open, which usually results in Muselian, Carcassonne, Bastogne, and Orion all declaring war on you by turn 5. The one saving grace that Grom has is his Cauldron, and the Cauldron, with all of its cooking, is actually pretty fun. You have some genuinely interesting effects, such as Dragon's Breath, which makes it so that way arrows from Goblin and Night Goblin units will explode, or Lizard Legs, which increases armor and leadership for all Goblin Cav units, or Goldfish, which decreases global recruitment durations and increases the income and control for your entire faction. So there are some genuinely good benefits in here, and going around collecting all of the different ingredients is pretty fun. The main issue with Grom the Paunch is the early game, where you have to go and attack Ulthwine while your territory back in Bretonnia gets captured. The unpleasant climate just really holds him back, and for that reason, he takes the number 3 spot on the list. Coming in at number 2 is Gorbad Ironclaw. For his faction effects, he has access to Deplan, improved rewards for successfully completing a Wa, income from raising settlements plus 15% for all armies, and a global recruitment duration of minus 1 turns faction-wide. His Lord effects are upkeep minus 10% for all units in his army, leadership aura size plus 100%, ability orcs are the best, and the army ability of Gorbad's Wa. For his starting location, he starts out in the Badlands, begins with 2 settlements, and is at war with the Scabbii. Karazakrak isn't too far away, all the dwarfs dislike you, and the Skaven are relatively neutral but will probably go to war with you eventually. Your tactics that you have access to are okay at best. It'll take a while for them to be extremely good, and some of them are good. Regimental gives an upkeep reduction of minus 15% for all units in your army. Getting the passive ability of Broodmothers for Ragnarok units can be good. Or Vanguard deployment for all units in your army is also extremely good. So there are some good tactics, but they're not particularly great, and they will take a while to get them going. However, unlike a lot of the other Greenskin factions, you really don't have any immediate threats. You start out at war with an extremely weak Greenskin faction. Your biggest hurdle will probably be taking Karazakrak, but that's not all that difficult. You do have Chaos Dwarfs over here, but it's going to be a while before you have to worry about them, which leaves your only other threats as the Skaven or Khorne. So in short, Gorbad Ironclaw isn't gore great, but he is gore good, because he has absolutely no difficult immediate threats, which gives you time to build up your economy and build up your military before taking on more difficult factions. And coming in at the number 1 spot is Azog the Slaughterer. His faction effects are he has diplomatic relations plus 40 with Vampire Counts and Arkan the Black. All armies are immune to vampiric attrition. Hero capacity plus 2 for Giant River Troll Hags. And Winds of Magic cost minus 10% for Lore of Death spells all characters. For his Lord effects, Azog has access to the Lore of Death magic, attribute immune to psychology for all units in his army, income from sacking settlements plus 25%, and he gets the army ability Azag's Wa. For your starting location, you start out in the mountains, and you are at war with some ogres. There are Chaos Dwarves not too far away, as well as normal dwarves beneath you, and the entirety of the Empire and Kislev right next to you. However, that is actually to your benefit, since if you look at the victory conditions, you have to hold Ostermark, the River Urskoy, Ostland, Peak Past, and your starting province of the Northern World's Edge Mountains. So getting all of the objectives for the victory conditions are not that difficult, and all vampire accounts have their aversion negated by their tolerance to your faction. So you can strike up an alliance with Manfred von Karstein for then going through and conquering the Empire. This is different since normally you do not as a Greenskin ally with the undead, but with Azag's the Slaughterer's campaign, you can do that. So what you wind up doing is you secure your territory, set up some defensive spots in case anyone tries to attack you, and then you go out and conquer the entirety of the Empire, and a lot of the Imperial factions will go down without putting up too much of a fight. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for more content like this. Also, go check out my Discord server as well as my Patreon. Links to both those in the description below. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.